quick introduction. We have gathered here today to talk about metaphysical metabolism. And so here's Dr. Nature. He's the Ayurvedic practitioner and physical as well as metaphysical detox expert. I'll put it this way. And my name is Irina Ra. I'm yoga and healthy plant-based cooking instructor. So we will be facilitating this discussion today. So please feel free to ask questions, to volunteer share your experience, your knowledge. This is what we are here for. The way that we propose to conduct this meeting is we present a topic and then we can all discuss it. Okay, so some of the concepts that we will be delving into today may seem a little bizarre or they may be new for you. So please, let's keep an open mind. Let's share, but be very mindful of the fact that somebody may think differently and just have a very nice amicable discussion. So we come from the yoga Ayurvedic background, so we will be speaking from this standpoint, obvious. So having said that, is anybody present here or online participants, do you have any yoga, Ayurveda, metaphysical, or some kind of energy healing experience? Yes, Brad, please.
I've been through a 3-week cleansing and a 4-week mushroom cleansing and anti-parasitic with Dr. Nature Healing. And I've been on a raw vegan diet for about 7 months, and I've fallen short of that, but I'm more adopting the Ayurvedic mindset more and more.
Excellent.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else would like to share?
An Ayurvedic 3-week protocol with Varuni. Do you know Varuni? Practicing Ayurvedic medicine.
Here, locally?
Yeah.
In Florida? Okay.
Yeah. She lives in Gainesville. Daughter Krishni.
Okay. What did it do for you?
Well, it was the first time I'd ever had experience. So she said it's a very common protocol, kind of a gut reset kind of thing. I don't know if it's really a detox. You know, those 2-day broth fast and then other kind of things and ginger. Maybe different than your protocols, which I've been meaning to talk to you about too, but very beneficial. And then some Ayurvedic herbal remedies included in that because I had a specific reason I wanted to do this. But she said it's a cleanse that's good to do more than once a year. So I plan to repeat it.
I found a program of eating that's it's helping me a lot to clear thinking and my health. Not any particular teacher teaching me. I just found it myself by experimenting. 4 days a week, I eat very simple food, steamed vegetables, and maybe a few beans and rice, something very simple. And then 3 days a week, I fast completely, just eating water. So I've been doing this a couple of years and it works for me.
Very intriguing topic. How can metabolism get to be metaphysical, what it even means? So we'll talk in detail. It's very interesting, fascinating topic, actually. I also want to mention that I'm RN too. Yeah, so I'm physician's assistant initially. I'm Ayurvedic practitioner, and that's where my heart really lies. And today it will be the new aspect of Ayurveda that's not really talked about much, and not many Ayurvedic practitioners would actually get into that. And we will discuss that. That may actually open up a new ways for you to understand Ayurveda.
Okay, wonderful. So what brings you all here or online? What is it about this topic that you found interesting?
Are all sugars not good for you? Is honey okay? But besides that fact, are there any types of sugar that are okay, natural or in the fruit form, or just sugar, organic, from the sugar cane? That's my question.
Great question, and many people are confused with the sugar question. So any refined processed sugar is not good. Not even the monk fruit sweetener. Yeah. No. The only sugar which is good is raw coconut sugar, which is the dehydrated coconut nectar. That would be more or less acceptable type of sugar if we're talking about refined sugar. But the best sugar, of course, is the one in the natural fructose, fresh fruit fructose, living sugar in its synergetic environment inside the fruit, and better yet, ripe fruit. If the fruit is unripe, it has a little different energies too, as far as the doshas and how it would affect your constitution at the same time, but that would be normal and natural. For example, unripe bananas are now considered to be good with a resistant starch. That's because it's not yet formed full sugar. Yeah, a lot of fructose, and it is in bound form, and this is why it's processed differently. At the same time, the resistant starch has different quality. It affects more vata than kapha, let's say. The only sugar which is good is fresh fructose and honey. Well, honey is good too, but honey is a little controversial because honey is not just the fructose. It also has the insect enzyme, and they are protein. And this is a controversial combination, actually. But that sugar is a little fermented, especially if the honey is preserved over winter. So that's like very potent honey. Honey has to actually be taken alone without any other food. And then it would have the medicinal property. It would have the medicinal effect. So we don't want to mix honey with anything.
Not for entertainment, basically, but as a medicine.
Mhm.
Well, that was part of my protocol too, was honey with ginger.
Well, maybe ginger
Certain
a little
kinds
bit.
of
Yeah,
thing.
ginger can be added, but nothing else really. Honey has to really be looked at and treated carefully. First thing in the morning with maybe a little lemon and a little ginger juice, like 1 tablespoon. And yet it should actually be better if you roast honey inside your mouth cavity. You don't just swallow it right away, but you suck on it and make the fructose dissolve and get absorbed inside the mouth cavity. And then the other part of honey, which is the enzymes, will be digested through the stomach, and this way actually it benefits. And it actually has the property to dissolve the liver gallstone.
Can someone use naturally dried fruit, maybe sun-dried fruit? Can they cook with it as a sweetener, or does it depend on with what?
Technically, you can if you don't overcook it too, but depends on what types of sugar is in that product. Like for example, well, you wouldn't probably dry your grains because you just soak your grains and you cook them. But there's a great controversy with the grains too, and we can discuss that. But we're not planning to discuss this time. But drying some foods and then cooking with them is fine. Yeah, it's just like you rehydrating them, but drying the food is actually gets that water out of the food, right? The part that hydrates it. The native moisture in the fruit or the vegetable has this very properly structured water, and this is the best water. If so, drying it's getting rid of that moisture inside the product, and then rehydrating it does not actually return the livelihood to the prana, because that water, the native water in the fruit, that what preserves the prana in that food. When you dry it, you somewhat diminish the prana in it.
So it's like
And
the
then-
lifeblood of the.
Yes,
Yeah,
believe it or
exactly,
not,
yes.
soup is actually a dehydrating food. So a lot of
Soup?
people, yes, because it has been cooked, so prana
Yeah,
is
well,
gone.
Generally, cooked food is dehydrating. It's even if you're eating soup, it's dehydrating.
Yes,
But
but
it's hydrated because we have two reservoirs of water inside our body. One is external, one is the internal, like intracellular, extracellular fluid. So extracellular fluid, which is the water circulating within the bloodstream, may be well hydrated, well nurtured, but the intracellular reservoir may be depleted at the same time because that water has not a proper structure to penetrate inside the cell. It is the surface tension coefficient. There are a number of physical parameters to the water that allow its flowability inside the cell. This is why now what's becoming popular is smart water, ionized water, hydrogen ionized water. They even now speculate, but this is not just speculation, that the water structure has to be different, not H2O, but H3O2, which has a higher amount of the hydrogen ions, which actually is the component that helps the water to be properly absorbed by the tissues, not just circulate inside the bloodstream.
Is rice considered rice? Is cooked rice considered a dry food? Soup would be, but dried cooked rice?
It could be dehydrating. Generally, yes, any could be dehydrating for sure. Then what happens with rice? There's another controversy, and this is what I was actually about to. But then, so the grains, they are they are controversial in terms that the grain inside has the endosperm. Endosperm is the reserve of the carbohydrate, but the carbohydrate is bound by certain proteins that are called lectins. Lectin is a protein that binds the carbohydrate inside the endosperm, the grain. And therefore carbs, and remember, like I said before, carbs and proteins are not really good together. So what happens is when we cook grain, we release that bond. Yes, but then if we cook it over the temperature of 75 degrees, which we all do because we need to make the rice boil, that actually denatures the protein, and these lectins, they don't just seep away, but they change the structure and they clump together and they form a stronger bond. So at the same time, we've released the carbohydrate, which at the same time is not the type of carbohydrate that possesses the hydrogen ion in it, which would represent prana. So it's completely different carbohydrate from fresh fruit fructose. Okay, and that's not like living carbohydrate, and that protein would not be very well digested by our system, but will turn into polyethylene type sludge, which would actually clog the liver and congest it, and the intestine too. So rice and grains, generally like that, in the preserved state, are not good products in the end. I mean, in the long run, they will begin showing some harm.
If any kind of grain or bean is soaked under 75 degrees, is that healthy?
Well, cooked, you mean? Right. Well, soak. Let's talk about soaking. Soaking is good, especially whole grain, not just white rice. There's no sense of soaking white rice, really. Well, maybe to get some lectins out of it, but not completely. Some lectins will still retain within the structure of that rice. But the whole grain rice, what's going to happen is it's going to start germinating. That will release a lot of lectins, and that will kickstart the pranic process. So that's better. Better yet is when we sprout grain and legume. In fact, this is how they're supposed to be consumed when they're sprouted. The sprouted is the best way to consume the grains and legumes. We increase the protein content, which is different from lectins, and then we reduce the amount of lectins in it too, and we vitalize that grain. But at the same time, if we were to sprout the grain and cook it, then we would still denature the proteins, and it would still yield some amount of that waste inside our intestine.
And in other words, what you're saying, the degree that would not do good for it is above 75 for anything.
Well, the initial denaturation of protein begins from 40 to 60 degrees centigrade. In about 75 centigrades, this is the peak point where the irreversible denaturation of protein happens. At that point, the protein pretty much loses its original structure and then rebinds and forms the clump. Very tough and really just impossible to break. And in order to break those bonds, our stomach will have to secrete more acids and pepsin, and that is acidic. The more acidic the environment and inside our body will become. So that's going to be the trigger for the acidity. Yes.
So I was just wondering how for centuries people have been eating beans and rice.
Yeah. Well, and for centuries, they've been exercising that metabolic mode that we're going to talk about, which is the hot metabolic mode, because it's based on principle of secretion of enzymes and acids. It overstimulates the Jatarakni, but at the same time that it still can sustain us and give us the ways to live up to 100 years, even maybe, beyond that. It would still create the pollution inside our body, the retention of waste products and toxins. Of course, I'm not talking about the modern day when the food is really polluted, beyond just lectins. There's like pesticide and other chemicals and heavy metals, along with that, and whatever they spray on grains and legumes, because in previous centuries they didn't. But at the same time, if you're staying active and under the condition you're eating that food, you will still maintain your health to the point that the body will begin aging within the time frame of 100 years, but that's still limiting. See, this metabolic mode, which processes the food in a hot mode, is still viable. It is still the way to survive and live and even maybe thrive, but it is secondary. there is another metabolic mode, which actually is liberated, that has different parameters and different qualities. It structures the tissue and it purifies the mind in a way that this metabolic mode that we all live in would never be able to, that we were going to talk about today.
Take one last question.
Yes.
And then let's all cover the metaphysical part of it, and then we'll tie it all together.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm curious about the concept of cooked food being dehydrating. What about the Ayurvedic recommended principle of consuming mostly, if not only, cooked food due to raw food indigestible challenge? Thanks.
Well, it's dehydrating, but at the same time, we're in a habit of drinking water, and we're drinking considerable amounts of water on a daily basis, 2 quarts of water at least a day, which we'll do. Let's say if we are on a raw food nutrition, then the hydration needs are significantly diminished. And the water really comes from the fresh fruit and vegetables, from greens, from fruit, especially very well ripe fruit. And, you know, today it's not just what I say because I know this, because I studied, right, or read or heard from my teachers, but because I've experienced it. So what I'm going to talk about comes from our experience. We're going to talk about. I personally, when I was on fruit for 5 months, I did not drink a cup of water. I did not want to drink water. I mean, I swam in a lake, you know, I took showers, of course, and our skin has this property where it can absorb the moisture from the atmosphere. And that's, but I did not feel the need. I did not experience thirst. It was quenched by just eating some fresh, ripe fruit. That's all there was.
And
And
that has been my experience as
I
well.
was surprised at myself, and then I realized how it works. It was just completely different. Yeah.
But the question is actually about, I think there is a little bit of confusion because we're talking about Ayurveda, but at the same time, we're saying that cooked food is dehydrating, but Ayurveda nowadays is all about cooked food.
Oh,
So
yes, of
For
course.
let's-
digestibility.
yes, so
Because
let's clarify that. So yes, and for Vata, yes.
I want my raw salads, but no, I'm having sabji in.
Well, dosha, I will leave it up to you, but what I would like to say is that it is a common misconception that Ayurveda does not support raw food, because there are definitely parts of Ayurveda that recommend juices as part of the healing regimen. Ayurveda has gone many iterations, let's put it this way. So nowadays, what we have is an Ayurveda for Kali Yuga people. Yes, absolutely. Outside of the mainstream Ayurveda, there is the more authentic part of it that definitely does not prohibit raw foods or juicing or anything like that. So-
Ayurveda has 3 ways of practice. One is tantrika, the other is yantrika, and then mantrika. At the level of mantrika, it's really all about prana. It's not so much about dosha. Prana and consciousness play more important role than just the dosha itself. You can try to modify, optimize, and change dosha on daily basis. And if you stop your practice, then the next day your dosha is imbalanced again. And then you have to take care of it. You have to rebalance it and so on. Doshas, they are humors of life. They're unstable and they spread along the female channels. So they're negative forces. Doshas are unstable and they are negative forces. The positive force is the conscious channel. So if you were to elevate your consciousness, then doshas will optimize on their own. So it's like where the male channel goes and consciousness is the male channel, that's where female follows.
Of course it is.
Yes, so,
Just kidding. I know what you mean.
but that's.
Like a battery.
Yeah, this is how it's.
Positive and negative.
Yeah, right. There you go. So I come from the lineage of Shakyavansa Ayurveda, which is dedicated to Pranic Ayurveda. So we give more emphasis on prana and consciousness, more so than particularly dosha balance.
Ayurveda has become more materialistic because of the age we live in. So it's right now its purpose is to help people maintain their gross physical bodies. Over generations, it has been happening so that we have been distancing ourselves more and more from those ways. So generation after generation, we keep losing that ability to process prana, which is why, cooked foods are the mainstream nutrition nowadays. So, but Dr. Nature will talk more about it.
Yeah, well, I hope a lot of
Energy nutrition versus
I hope many questions will get answered as we go. So
Yes.
let's just
yes.
No, sorry, let's do the
Okay,
presentation.
Okay, in other words, one last thing from Rukmini. In other words, is it still a good idea to eat cooked food, which you are not against?
No,
Thanks for
no,
the
of course not.
caveat line of discussion, Irina.
This is where you are, and this is what your body is attuned with, and we're not trying to yank you out of the nutrition style. But if you set up the goal to transition to a healthier nutrition, each step would be associated and should be associated with intense energy practices, because if we don't practice energy but think that just transitioning to a different food type is enough, then it is not so. It is misunderstanding.
If you engage in certain practices such as pranayama, meditation, yoga, mantras as well, you are opening up those energy channels so you can process prana better, which is when you can start transitioning more to raw foods. So that would be the ideal way to do it. But until then, we think that cooked plant-based foods are absolutely wonderful for modern day people.
Yeah, we just start taking steps one by one, refining your physical nutrition and engaging into energy practices. Okay, so let's begin. This week I already touched upon the origin of life. Now the notion is that, and this is what scientists are scrutinized on, is the physical matter. They analyze physical matter, they study, they think that physical matter is the source of life, and anything that doesn't fit into the matrix of the five senses is written off as non-existent. But yet the tools are developed. Tools allow scientists to analyze it to the point that they understand that there is something else behind it. They're trying to understand how a quantum particle functions. But in fact, the particle is not really a particle in the quantum realms, because in a certain expression of metaphysical being, the particle is existent. But in the higher metaphysical realms, particle does not exist. Our higher chakras, they emit flares and waves, and lower chakras emit particles. If we want to see the particle to be metaphysical, it has to disappear. It has to turn into a flare, into a wave, into pretty much the sound and some radiance before it can actually be detected in a different part of the universe. And this is how the consciousness can actually serve the waves and flares of the higher chakras in order to visit distal part of the universe. So this is what yoga has been exploiting. When in deep meditation, they can visit any part of the universe without having to board a rocket and acquire the speed of light. That flare actually moves much quicker than any speed of light. But it's not the thought, because thought can be confused. So it's not the particularly manas, conscious mind, that does that. It is more on a different level. It's the mahat that emits that wave. We have different expression of mind too. And one of them is the higher mind, which is called mahat. And there is buddhi also, which is the reasoning mind, and there's manas. So we associate manas with the consciousness, but we'll touch upon that. But the real origin of life comes from spirit. And people who are religious, and they would believe in that. Of course, spirit is the beginning of life, the origin. Yet they also believe scientists that are trying to find the origin of life in the body, which is, absolute absurd. So the spirit wraps up into the mental kosha or sheath, and then it wraps up into the material kosha. It's like one body precedes the other. Okay, so on. All right, so two types of metabolism. This is the subject of our discussion today. So the first metabolism, the higher metabolism, we call cold energy synthesis. This is vibrational realm, the high frequency. The energy at that level is bright and cold, and it has the most potential. It has the potential for the entire expression of life at different levels. It has the intelligence of what the cells need to do, how they need to function, how they need to process the energy and the matter. At the same time, it is free of any residue that forms after it, and it's alkaline. So this is the spectrum where the body can actually thrive and live the long time. So this is the environment created by this metabolic mode is free of indwelling toxins, of parasites, and in fact, this type of metabolic mode functions on bioelectromagnetic flares, inductions, and combustion. So it is the electromagnetic power induction that gives the start to biochemical reaction and follows through to have them fully expressed. And the lower metabolism is called hot energy synthesis. This is where we all live in. This is where our Jatharagni, which is at this point, processes the matter, trying to create energy from matter, which is very highly demanding process. It requires a lot of energy to be invested prior, and it is acidic. It's forming a lot of toxins, toxic residue, which then accumulates within the body and needs to also be cleared out by macrophages and by enzymes, which our body has to yet secrete on top of that. So see how demanding it is. And this is how we are just wasting the reserves of our internal energy just to overcome byproducts of this metabolism. But yet this metabolism actually gets us through life. We survive on it, yet it actually puts us in a, in a negative mindset because it's acidic, and acid actually affects the mind and makes it produce hot emotions like anger, jealousy, things like that. But there is another component to why it is negative. It's not just metabolic activity of our body. Something underlies that, and that is in the mind, and we'll get to that right now. So the next slide, I just wanted to quickly show you here is what the hot metabolism does. These are the structure of our digestive system. This is the layers of our tissues, and each layer of tissue has its own conscience in terms of how it processes the matter, how it processes the gross matter. Okay, so once the food essence is ready inside our tract, the food essence can also be of a different quality based on how our digestive tract functions, because it may also be to some degree dysfunctional, and therefore the food matter would also have the poor quality. And then it enters the bloodstream or enters the tissues. And at this point, there is no way that it's digested any further. Like, remember about those proteins that I was talking about? If we consume too much of denatured proteins, then they don't get disassembled to amino acids and fractional forms. They get into our tissues, and at this point, they cannot actually be disassembled any further. So they will pose the threat of being an antigen, and the allergic reaction may begin. Then here's between the two tissues, there is a membrane, which is the membrane that refines the food essence in order to retain nutrients for this tissue, but allow the nutrients for the next tissue up and saturate the next tissue. And so the food essence travels all the way to nurture the higher tissues, the genital tissue, even the ojas. But that ojas is apara ojas. So that is the unstable ojas, where we have the stable ojas, which is para ojas, which actually is very enhanced in the other metabolic mode. It is enhanced and supported too. So unhealthy fat forms, and this is the toxin. See that a lot of toxins are formed along this route, and the fat retains these toxins too. So fat and connective tissues, they are great retainers of toxins. Therefore, it's advised not to maintain this unnecessary, because one thing is there's healthy fat, then essential fractions of lipids, and this is unhealthy fat that we need to break down. But once we break this fat down, then toxins are released, and then they need to come out. This is where we can detox. We do detox in order to support this a system of cascading toxins and metabolic waste down from tissues up and then into the external environment. Okay, this is the hot metabolism, and hope you understand the drawbacks and advantages of it. Okay, now let's get to talk about the cold synthesis metabolism. It all starts with prana. We know what prana is, but people who know Ayurveda need to also understand that Mahaprana and Prana Vayu are different energy, even though they call the same. So we're going to talk about Mahaprana. The Prana Vayu is the subdosha of Vata dosha. So Prana comes from Purusha Prakriti interaction. This is where the divine love yields Prana, the real life force, the sustainer of all the living. Everything is sustained in this world because our divine parents love each other. And that love is expressing from moment to moment, all the time. And just based on that, we can live. We cannot live in any other way. But, so every time that you think of your life, be grateful that divine parents are still in love and they're interacting every time. This is the bliss. Every moment is the bliss. They are like in perpetual orgasm, and this is what enlivens us, really. If you find this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to our channel, and get notifications. Also, leave a comment of at least 8 words. Comments make difference.